When I first saw him, my breath caught in my throat, because I knew this wasn't an accident. I was winding up that mountain road, tires crunching through the snow, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the flurries, the kind of cold that crawls under your skin and stays there. It was late winter, the time when even the trees look starved, stripped bare by months of frost. I remember thinking how silent it was, no birds, no movement, just me and the endless white. And then, I saw him, a wolf, standing on the side of the road, maybe 20 yards ahead. At first glance, he looked like every nightmare they tell you about wild country. Gray fur, sharp lines, a silhouette against the snow. I gripped the wheel tighter, heart pounding. Out here, a wolf means danger. That's what I believed my whole life. But then I looked closer. His ribs were showing, every bone sharp as broken glass under that ragged coat. He wasn't standing proud like a predator. He was slumped, hollow. His legs looked like they could give out any second. And his eyes, God, those eyes weren't hunting. They weren't angry. They were pleading, like a man begging for one more chance. I slowed the truck without thinking. He didn't move, didn't growl, didn't run, just stared, like he'd been waiting for me. My stomach tightened. This wasn't normal. Wolves don't just stand there and look at you like that. I cracked the window, breath fogging up the glass. The air was so sharp it hurt to breathe. My lunch was sitting on the seat beside me, half a sandwich, nothing special. And for reasons I still can't explain, I reached over, unwrapped it, and tossed a piece out into the snow. It landed a few feet from him with a soft thud. I expected him to lunge for it, or bolt into the trees. That's what wild animals do, but he didn't. He just lowered his head, slow, like he was ashamed, like taking food from me was some kind of defeat. And then, with this heartbreaking caution, he stepped forward and sniffed it. I swear I heard my own heartbeat over the wind. He didn't rip into it, didn't snarl or fight. He just ate, like someone who hadn't had a meal in weeks, maybe months. Every bite careful, every glance flicking back to me, like he was afraid I'd change my mind. And then, just as silently as he appeared, he turned and walked back toward the tree line. No sound, no threat, just a shadow melting into the snow. I sat there gripping the wheel, staring at the empty roadside, wondering what the hell just happened. I thought that was the last I'd ever see of him, but the mountains don't forget kindness. He didn't look at me like a predator. He looked at me like a man begging for a second chance. I couldn't stop thinking about those eyes. All night, they haunted me, hollow, burning, asking for something I didn't know how to give. I told myself it was crazy, that it was just an animal, that I should forget it and move on. But the truth? I couldn't. The next day, I loaded the truck with whatever scraps I could find. Raw meat, bones from last night's dinner, even a few hunks of bread. It felt like I was breaking some unwritten law, like I was crossing into a place I didn't belong. But I drove back up that winding road anyway, heart pounding harder with every turn. Snow was falling again when I spotted him. Same place, same stance, like he'd been waiting. When our eyes met, something twisted in my chest. He didn't run, didn't flinch, just stood there, ribs sharp against his fur, as if the cold couldn't bite any harder than hunger already had. I killed the engine, stepped out, boots crunching into the snow. The air hit me like a blade, sharp, merciless. My breath turned white as smoke as I reached for the bag of meat. "Here," I said softly, my voice almost lost to the wind. "I brought you something." He tilted his head, one ear flicking like he understood me. I tossed a chunk into the snow. It landed between us, dark against the white. He moved, slow as a shadow, eyes never leaving mine. Every step was a question. He sniffed the meat, then looked back at me, and I swear, there was hesitation, like he wanted permission. Then he ate, careful and silent, and retreated just far enough to watch me. and that became our ritual. Day after day, I came back, sometimes with scraps from my kitchen, sometimes with meat from the butcher. Every time, he was there, always waiting, always watching, and every time I talked to him, not because I thought he understood, but because it felt wrong to feed something so wild in silence. I told him things I hadn't told another soul, about the loneliness that crept in since my wife left, about how the house felt empty when the snow came, about how I didn't know why I cared so much whether he lived or died. He never answered, of course, just listened. And then came the day everything changed. It was colder than usual, the wind slicing through my coat. I set the meat down and turned, expecting him to eat like always. But when I looked back, he wasn't at the food. He was coming toward me. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed at me to move, to run. This was still a wolf, wild and powerful, even starved. But I froze, heart pounding like a drum in my ears. He walked right up to me, close enough that I could see the frost on his whiskers, and lowered his head to my boots. Just sniffed, slow, cautious. Then he stepped back, silent as the snow. No growl, no teeth, just that same burning gaze, softer now. He could have attacked. Instead, he just looked at me, and in that look, there was something like gratitude. And then, just like that, he turned and vanished into the trees, leaving me standing there with shaking hands and a heart that felt too big for my chest. That day, I thought we'd reached the peak of trust. But trust is tested in storms. The third week was when everything changed. By then, our ritual had become almost normal. I'd pull up, kill the engine, and find him there, waiting. He was stronger now, his coat a little thicker, his eyes brighter. I told myself I was doing a good thing, that maybe, just maybe, he had a chance. That day, I had fresh meat. The sky was heavy, clouds like bruises hanging low over the mountains, but I didn't think much of it. I stepped out into the snow, the cold biting harder than usual, and whistled softly like I always did. But he wasn't there. I set the meat down, called out again, my breath curling into the still air. Nothing, just the whisper of wind through the pines. For the first time, I felt uneasy. Then I heard it, a sound from the trees. Not a growl, not a howl. A low, restless whimper that sent a chill crawling up my spine. He appeared a moment later, bursting out of the shadows like something was chasing him. His chest was heaving, his fur slicked with frost, eyes wide and wild. But it wasn't hunger I saw in them this time. It was something else. He didn't go for the food. He didn't even glance at it. Instead, he started pacing, back and forth, circling, his breath steaming in the freezing air. Every muscle in his body looked wired tight, like a coiled spring about to snap. I froze, watching him, my heartbeat loud in my ears. "What is it?" I whispered, my voice breaking in the silence. "What's wrong?" He stopped suddenly and stared at me, dead still. That stare hit me like a punch. Then his head snapped toward the tree line. His ears shot forward. Every hair on my neck stood on end. And then I heard it too, a groan, deep and low, echoing from the mountain itself, like the earth was shifting. The sky above rumbled, dark and heavy, and in the distance the wind began to howl, a sound that made the pines shiver. A storm was coming. But the way he moved, the urgency, the tension, it felt like more than that. He wasn't warning me about snow. There was something else out there, something I couldn't see. He trotted toward the trees, then stopped, turned back, and locked eyes with me again. That look made my blood run cold. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking behind me, and that look made my blood run cold. For a split second, I thought I saw a shadow move through the pines. Big, silent, gone before I could breathe. My throat tightened. I stepped back, clutching the truck door. "What the hell?" He let out a low, urgent growl, not at me, but at whatever was lurking beyond. Then he turned, bolted into the woods, and vanished like smoke in the wind. I stood there in the falling snow, shaking, heart pounding so hard it hurt. I thought he was just hungry. I didn't know he was trying to save my life. The storm didn't just come, it exploded. One moment, the sky was gray and heavy. The next, it was a wall of white fury crashing down on the mountain. Snow whipped across the windshield like shards of glass. My wipers thrashed back and forth, but it was useless. I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, tires crunching through the slush. My gut told me to turn back, but the road behind me was gone, swallowed by snow. Then came the sound, a low rumble that rose into a howl as the wind slammed against the truck, rocking it on the icy pavement. And then, the tires spun. "Come on," I muttered, slamming the gas. Nothing. The truck lurched, groaned, and sank deeper. I tried reverse, forward, anything. But all I heard was the sickening whine of rubber on ice. That's when the reality hit me like a punch. I wasn't going anywhere. I killed the engine and sat there, breath fogging up the glass, heart pounding against my ribs. My phone had no signal, no headlights in the distance. Just white, endless, merciless white. The temperature dropped fast. My fingers ached, stiff and useless as I pulled my coat tighter. The wind howled like something alive, shrieking through the pines. Every instinct screamed the same thing. If I stay here, I die. I shoved the door open, nearly ripped from its hinges by the wind, and stumbled out into the storm. Snow stung my face like needles. Within seconds, I was soaked to the bone, teeth rattling as I tried to breathe through the freezing air. And then, through the blinding white, I saw movement, a shadow, low, steady, cutting through the storm like it owned it. My heart stopped. The wolf. He stood a few yards away, his coat dusted in frost, eyes burning like embers in the snowstorm. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other through the chaos. And then, he turned, walked a few steps, stopped, looked back. He walked ahead, then looked back, as if saying, "Follow me if you want to live." Every part of me knew this was insane. Following a wolf into the wilderness? It sounded like a death sentence. But something deeper, something I can't explain, told me to trust him. So I did. I stumbled after him, boots sinking into drifts that swallowed my legs. The wind roared, erasing every trace of the road, every sign of safety. But the wolf never faltered. He moved with purpose, circling back every few yards to make sure I was still there. Minutes stretched into an eternity. My lungs burned. My muscles screamed. I thought about collapsing right there in the snow, just letting it end. But every time I slowed, he stopped too, waiting, watching. And then I saw it, a dark slit in the white, a cave hidden in the mountainside, its mouth gaping like salvation. I stumbled inside and collapsed onto the frozen ground, gasping for air as the wind screamed outside. The wolf followed, silent as a ghost, and sat a few feet away, his breath curling in the dim light. Relief hit me like a tidal wave. I was alive. I was safe. I thought the cave was the end of the nightmare. But what waited inside, it changed everything. The cave was dark, colder than I imagined, the walls slick with ice that caught what little light bled in from the storm outside. My breath echoed in the silence, ragged and harsh. I pressed my back to the stone, chest heaving, trying to convince myself I'd made it, that I was safe. Then I saw them, 2 pinpricks of light, then 4, then 6, eyes, glowing, unblinking, deep inside the black. My blood turned to ice, shapes began to emerge, low, silent shadows sliding across the cave floor. Wolves, 3, 4, maybe more. They moved with that slow, terrifying grace predators have when they know there's no escape. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My mind screamed for me to run, but my legs were stone. This was it. After everything, the feeding, the trust, The storm. I was about to die in the dark. The wolf, the one I'd been feeding, the one who led me here, stood a few feet in front of me, his body rigid, ears flat. He didn't back away. He didn't look at them like family. He looked at them like a threat. One of the wolves crept closer, lips curling back to reveal teeth that flashed in the dim light. A low growl rumbled through the cave, vibrating in my bones. And then it happened. The starving wolf, my wolf, snapped forward with a snarl so savage it shook the walls. He planted himself between me and them, his body a shield, teeth bared, eyes burning. The other wolves froze, startled by his fury. One lunged, and he hit it like a thunderclap, sending it sprawling across the ice. The cave exploded with sound, snarls, yelps, the scrape of claws on stone. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering, hands shaking so hard I could barely hold on to myself. And then, silence. One by one, the other wolves backed away, tails low, growls fading as they melted into the darkness, swallowed by the cave. I just stared, breathless, disbelieving. My wolf, skin and bone just weeks ago, stood tall, chest heaving, fur bristling, like a soldier guarding his post. He turned his head then, slowly, and looked at me, and I swear to God, there was no hunger in that look, no wild rage, just something I still can't name. He didn't have to do that. He could have walked away, left me to them, but he didn't. He fought for me, against his own kind. In that moment, I knew I wasn't just a stranger. I was under his protection. I sank to the ground, trembling, trying to process what just happened. I thought I was safe now, but nature had one last trial for both of us. The storm raged outside like the mountain was tearing itself apart. Wind howled through the cave mouth, flinging snow inside in wild bursts. The cold was merciless. It crawled under my clothes, into my bones, into my soul. My body shook uncontrollably, teeth chattering so hard it hurt. I huddled in the dark, hugging my knees, watching him, the wolf, standing just a few feet away. He was still as stone, eyes glowing faintly in the shadows, his breath curling like smoke. For the first time since this all began, I wondered if he'd leave me now. But then, he moved. Slow, deliberate steps on the frozen ground. My breath caught as he came closer, closer, until I could see the frost on his fur and the scars etched into his lean body. He lowered himself, not in a crouch, not like a predator, but in something softer. He lay down beside me, close enough that his fur brushed my arm, and then he stayed. I don't know how long I sat there frozen, too stunned to move. His warmth seeped through my coat, a living heat against the bitter cold. My shaking slowed, my breathing eased, and for the first time that night, I believed I might live. Hours crawled by in silence, broken only by the storm's fury outside and the steady rhythm of his breath. I turned my head, looked at him, and something inside me cracked wide open. All my life, I thought survival was about strength, about weapons, about fighting harder than what wants to kill you. But lying there, with this wild creature pressed against me, I realized I was wrong. Survival, real survival, comes from trust, from connection. My throat burned as I whispered into the darkness, words I never thought I'd say to a wolf. "Thank you," I murmured, my voice raw. "I don't know why you're doing this, but I swear, I'll never forget." He shifted slightly, the weight of his body settling against mine, and in that moment, I felt it, the steady thud of his heartbeat, strong and relentless, echoing through his chest and into me. I felt his heartbeat against mine, and I understood. We were both just fighting to live. I lay there with tears freezing on my lashes, listening to the storm scream outside, feeling that wild pulse beside me. I thought the storm would take the longest night of my life, But dawn brought something that broke me to tears. When I opened my eyes, the world was white and silent. The storm had passed, leaving a pale light that spilled into the cave like liquid silver. My breath still hung in the cold air, but it didn't feel deadly anymore. I moved slowly, every muscle aching, and turned to where he lay. The wolf was awake, sitting now, watching me with those eyes I'd come to know so well, eyes that didn't belong to a mindless predator, but to something older, wiser. I pushed myself up, legs stiff and clumsy, and stepped toward the mouth of the cave. Outside, the mountain glittered like glass, every tree bent under the weight of ice. The road was gone, erased by drifts taller than a man. But the sky was clear. I could make it down, I told myself. If I moved now, I might survive. I turned back to him. "Come on," I whispered. My voice cracked in the silence. "Let's go." But he didn't move. He just sat there, staring at me. And for the first time since this began, I saw something in his eyes that tore me apart. Not hunger, not fear, something heavier, like he knew something I didn't. Then he rose to his feet, and I noticed the limp, a deep drag in his back leg. Blood had dried along his fur, hidden in the shadows of the night. He'd fought harder than I realized. For me. I opened my mouth to speak, but before a word left my lips, he turned and walked out into the blinding snow. "Wait!" I stumbled after him, boots crunching through the ice. He didn't stop, didn't look back. He climbed higher, toward the ridge above the cave, his body a gray silhouette against the white. When he reached the top, he lifted his head and howled. The sound split the air, low, raw, echoing through the mountains like a cry torn from the earth itself. And then, movement. From the trees below, a shape emerged. A deer, thin, trembling, one leg twisted at an unnatural angle. It limped through the drifts, drawn by the wolf's call, like prey answering a summons it couldn't resist. I froze, my chest constricted as the truth hit me like a hammer. He could have killed me that first night. He could have ripped me apart in the cave when hunger burned brightest. But he didn't. He chose not to. And now, after everything, he was choosing again. Not to follow me, not to stay, but to lead his pack back to life. I stood there with tears stinging my eyes, the cold forgotten, my breath breaking in the silence. He gave me my life, and then he just turned and vanished into the snow. I thought I'd never see him again, but the mountain wasn't done teaching me. Years passed before I saw those mountains again. Life had moved on. New job, new town, a different rhythm. But a part of me never left that cave. Winter after winter, I'd catch myself staring out at the first snow and feeling that same quiet weight in my chest. People asked why I never hunted again. I just told them, the mountains taught me enough. One February, I drove back. I told myself it was just to see the old roads, to feel the silence of the high country one more time. But deep down, I think I was chasing a ghost. The road was the same, narrow, winding, carved into the side of a world that doesn't care if you live or die. Snow crunched under my boots as I stepped out and started walking toward the ridge. The cold hit me like an old friend, sharp and biting. The air was so still it felt sacred. That's when I saw him. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks, a shape on the ridge, barely more than a shadow against the endless white. But then he moved, lifting his head with that same quiet strength, his fur rippling in the wind. My breath caught in my throat. A wolf. Not just any wolf. Him. Older now. Bigger. His coat thick and silvered by the years, but unmistakable. And then I saw it. The scar along his flank, jagged and pale against the gray. The one he earned the night he stood between me and death. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in the snow, staring up at him. The world fell away, the wind, the cold, the years between us. There was only that ridge, That wolf and those eyes, eyes that still burned like fire in the heart of winter. He didn't move at first, just watched me, and in that silent gaze, I felt everything: gratitude, strength, something that went beyond words, something that didn't need them. Then he howled, one long, low note that rolled through the mountains like thunder, shivering through my bones, echoing across the years like a promise kept. And then he was gone, just like before, silent as snowfall, melting into the trees. I stood there with tears freezing on my face, my breath shaking like a prayer I couldn't finish. I whispered the only words I had left: "Thank you." He remembered me. After all those years, he remembered. I stood there for a long time after he vanished, staring at that empty ridge like if I just waited long enough, he'd come back. The wind cut across the snow, the mountains silent except for the echo of that one last howl still humming in my bones. And then, slowly, I turned, back toward the camera, back toward you. If I told you a wolf saved my life, you'd call me a liar. If I told you he chose mercy over hunger, that he stood against his own to protect me, you'd laugh, shake your head, tell me it's a story I made up. But I know what I saw, and I'll spend the rest of my life believing that somewhere out there, a wild heart still beats, for me, not because of fear, not because of dominance, but because of something stronger. Not a bullet, not a fist, words, the quiet words I spoke in the dark that night. Thank you. I'll never forget. Maybe he didn't understand the language, but he understood the truth in them. Gratitude, respect. Those words saved me more than any weapon ever could. I walked down the mountain with that truth burning in my chest like a brand. You don't conquer the wild by force. You earn your place in it, with trust. So if you've ever felt nature speak to you, write this in the comments. Animals remember kindness. And if your heart is racing right now, you understand. Subscribe for more true stories from the wild. Because out there, beyond the reach of roads and reason, there are moments that change everything. Moments you can't explain. Moments that remind us we're not as different as we think. When I first heard it, I thought it was the wind. A low, dragging sound outside my cabin door. Then a heavy thump, and another, like something enormous shifting its weight in the dark. I froze. Out here, in the Montana mountains, you learn the difference between wind, trees, and something alive. This wasn't wind. This was breathing, slow, deep, too heavy for a deer, too steady for a moose, and the way the boards under the porch creaked. God, my throat went dry, my knees locked. I knew this wasn't a deer. For a second, I didn't even breathe. The fire in the stove had burned low, throwing long, nervous shadows across the room. I reached over and killed the lantern. The darkness wrapped around me like a coffin. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood in my ears. Then it happened, a sound that still makes my skin crawl when I think of it. A long, slow exhale, close, right outside the wall where I sat. My first thought, bear. And out here, that's the one visitor you pray you never get, especially alone, at midnight, in a wooden cabin that might as well be made of paper if a grizzly decides it wants in. I eased toward the window, slow as a ghost. My hands were slick with sweat. Every step creaked, and I felt like even the mountains were listening. When I reached the glass, I tilted just enough to look outside, and that's when I saw it. A massive shape in the moonlight, rising like a shadow with weight. It wasn't moving fast, it wasn't in a hurry, but its presence, God help me, it felt deliberate. The silver light from the half moon poured over its back, and for a second, I couldn't breathe at all. It was a bear, a full-grown grizzly, easily 8, maybe 9 feet if it stood up. Its fur looked almost blue under the moon, and it wasn't passing by. It wasn't looking for berries or sniffing around for scraps. It was looking at me, right through the glass. Its head low, shoulders like moving boulders, steam curling from its nostrils into the cold night. I swear the temperature dropped inside the cabin just seeing those eyes. Yellow, deep, but not empty. They burned with something I didn't understand, something more than hunger. I should have backed away, grabbed the rifle on the rack, barricaded the door. That's what you do out here. You don't hesitate when it comes to grizzlies. But I didn't move, because those eyes, they weren't wild in the way I expected. They weren't flat, or blank, or raging like every warning poster says. They were fixed on me like it knew me. And that thought, God, that thought hit me so hard I almost laughed out loud just to keep from losing my mind. Knew me? I'd been alone out here for months. I don't know bears. Bears don't know me. That's how it works. That's the rule. And yet, I couldn't shake it. It wasn't just staring. It was searching. Like there was a question in those eyes. Or maybe an answer. My pulse was hammering in my throat so hard I thought I'd pass out. I gripped the window frame so tight my knuckles went white. My breath fogged the glass. And then, God help me, it took one slow step closer. Its paw landed on the porch with a dull thud I felt in my chest. The boards groaned under its weight. The glass between us suddenly felt like tissue paper. If it wanted me, I was done. And yet, I didn't reach for the gun, because in that moment, something in me whispered, don't. Not fear, not survival instinct. Something else, something I can't explain even now. Maybe it was those eyes. Maybe it was the way the moon caught on a scar running along its foreleg. A scar I'd seen before, a scar I'd made sure healed. That's when the bottom dropped out of my stomach. My God, it can't be. Not here, not now, not after all these months. But I knew because no one forgets eyes like that, not even a man who's tried to bury every piece of the past in silence. The bear huffed once, steam rolling from its nose, then it lowered its head, and for a heartbeat the world narrowed to that single look. And I swear to you, in that silence, I felt the weight of something I couldn't name. Gratitude, memory, or maybe judgment. I don't know. All I know is this. I thought this was how it ends. A grizzly on my porch, midnight in the mountains, no one around to hear the screams. But then I saw its eyes, and I froze because they looked familiar. You ever hear a sound so desperate it crawls inside your bones? A sound that makes you move before your brain even catches up? That was the day everything started. Months back, deep in the timberline, late spring. I'd gone out with an axe, planning to clear deadfall near the creek. Snow was melting, earth soft and loud under my boots. I was halfway down the slope when I heard it. A cry, not a bird, not a fox. This was different, high-pitched, broken, like something trying to hold on to life and losing fast. I froze. Out here, any cry like that can mean trouble. Predator, trap, maybe worse. I followed the sound, heart hammering, boots sliding in the slush, every instinct screaming to turn back. But I couldn't. It was like that cry had hooked itself under my ribs and was dragging me in. And then I saw it. A cub. Small, maybe 6 months old, tangled in an illegal snare set by some bastard who didn't care what he caught. Its paw was shredded raw, bone almost showing, blood soaking into the snow like ink. But what stopped me cold wasn't the wound. It was the way it looked at me. God help me, it didn't snarl, didn't lunge, didn't fight. It just froze, eyes wide, wet, dark as midnight, and they locked on mine. And I swear on everything, those eyes weren't wild in that moment. They were begging. I dropped to my knees before I knew what I was doing. My hands shook as I reached for the trap. The steel jaws were rusted and biting deep into the flesh. Every second I hesitated was another second it bled out. I remember whispering, like an idiot, "It's okay, I'm here." Like words could mean anything to a creature that should have ripped me apart, but it didn't. It just stared, breathing in these quick, shallow bursts, trusting me for reasons I'll never understand. I got my knife out, fingers numb, and pried the spring until my palms split. The jaws snapped open with a metallic scream, and the cub jerked free, collapsing hard in the snow. Its paw, Jesus, torn to hell. I thought it wouldn't make it another hour. I could have left, should have left. That's what the books tell you. Don't interfere. Let nature run its course. But rules don't mean a damn thing when something looks at you like that, like you're the only thing standing between it and the dark. So I scooped it up, a ball of fur and blood, heavier than it looked, trembling so bad I felt the shakes through my chest. It didn't fight, didn't claw, just pressed its head against me, like it had given up everything except that one last gamble. I hauled it back to the cabin, every step a war against my own fear. If its mother was out there, she'd tear me in half before I took the next breath. But I never saw her, never heard her, just silence, and that cry still echoing in my skull. Back at the cabin, I cleaned the wound with what I had, boiled water, strips of old cloth, shaking hands. It whimpered once, a sound so soft I thought my heart would split. I fed it scraps, cooked meat, a little milk warmed by the fire. It ate like life was pouring back into it bite by bite, and through it all, those eyes never left me. Not once. I don't know how long I sat there, talking to it like some broken fool. You're gonna make it. You hear me? You're gonna live. And when the bleeding slowed and its breathing steadied, I whispered the words that haunt me now. Go, little one. Live. And it did. After 3 days, 3 days of me patching, feeding, praying, it limped to the tree line, turned once, and vanished into the pines without a sound. No drama, no goodbye, just gone, like smoke in the wind. I stood there a long time, staring at the spot where it disappeared, telling myself that was the end. I'd done my part. Nature would take it from there, and for a while, I believed that. But here's what no one tells you, not in books, not in all the years I spent in the wild. Nature doesn't forget. It should have charged by now. That's what my mind kept screaming as I stood frozen at the window, staring at a wall of fur and muscle under the moonlight. Every survival instinct I'd learned in 50 years told me the same thing. A grizzly this close is death waiting to happen. But it didn't move. Not the way I expected. It stood there, silent, breathing heavy, yes, but not with rage, not even with hunger. It was watching me, studying me like a man might read a letter written in a language he half remembers. And that's when my heart tripped over itself, because I saw the truth. This wasn't the little cub I'd carried in my arms, weak and bleeding. That was months ago. That cub was gone. This was something else now. An animal carved out of the wild, massive shoulders rolling under a pelt, thick as shadows, claws like ivory scythes catching the pale light. It had grown into everything nature intended it to be, and yet it had come here, to me. Why? Why after all this time? Why now? I tried to swallow, but my throat felt like glass. My voice was a ghost in my chest. I didn't dare speak, didn't dare move, because then I saw it, and it stopped my heart cold. Blood, not old, not faded into the fur, fresh, wet, dark as ink under the moon, smears across its shoulder, streaks down its flank. The scent hit me a moment later, iron and earth, sharp enough to make me gag. I gripped the windowsill so hard the wood bit into my palms. 100 thoughts detonated in my skull all at once. Had it killed? Was it hurt? Both? If it was wounded, it might be desperate, cornered. A cornered bear is a death sentence. But if that blood wasn't its own, God, what had it done? Then it shifted. One slow, deliberate step forward, its paw landing on the porch with a thud that traveled up my spine. Another step, and another, closing the distance like a ghost rolling downhill. Every board under its weight groaned in protest. I couldn't move, couldn't even blink. My chest was a fist, my lungs refusing air. All I could do was watch as it came closer, closer, until its face filled the window, steam curling from its nostrils, eyes locked on mine, and that's when I saw something else, something hanging from its mouth. At first, my mind refused to name it, just a dark shape, swinging gently from those jaws. But then the moonlight shifted, silver washing over metal, and the breath in my body died. It wasn't meat, it wasn't bone, it was a trap, a snare, twisted and broken, its steel jaws gaping like some dead thing's grin, rusted teeth glinting in the night, blood still dripping from the springs. My blood ran cold, because I knew that trap. Not that exact one, but its kind. I'd seen it before, clenched around a cub's paw, biting into soft flesh while it cried for a mother that never came. And now, here it was again. Not on the bear's leg, not cutting into its body. No. This time, the bear had carried it, dragged it God knows how far through the mountains. To me. I staggered back from the glass like it had reached through and grabbed me by the throat. My mind was a storm of voices, none of them making sense. Why bring it here? Why show me this? What the hell was I looking at? The bear lowered its head, letting the trap clatter onto the porch. The sound, a cold, hollow clang, echoed through the night like a gunshot. And then, silence. Just the sound of my own heartbeat, ragged and too loud, threatening to shake me apart. It looked at me then. Really looked. And I swear to God, if you put 1,000 years between that moment and now, I'd still feel the weight of that stare. It wasn't rage, it wasn't fear, it was something older, something heavier, gratitude, warning, memory, maybe all three, tangled together in a language I'll never understand. I thought it was over when the trap hit the porch, thought it would turn and vanish into the dark like before, but it didn't. It stayed, still as a carved statue, eyes burning through the glass, breath fogging in the cold, waiting. For what? I couldn't tell. All I knew was this: whatever was coming, this was only the beginning, and if I'd known what it was waiting for, what the night still held in its black hands, I would have locked every door and prayed harder than I've ever prayed in my life. The trap hit the porch with a clang that cut straight through me, cold steel glinting under the moonlight, blood still wet on its jaws. And that sound, it didn't just echo off the mountains. It echoed inside me, like a warning bell. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The bear stood there, head low, breath steaming in the bitter air, and I swear every hair on my arm stood up. My cabin suddenly felt too small, too fragile. The glass between us, a joke. But then my eyes dropped to the trap again, twisted and broken like a corpse, and it hit me. It wasn't wearing it. It wasn't caught. It had carried it here, dragged it across God knows how many miles of snow and shadow just to put it at my door. And the only thought pounding in my head was this: it remembered. Not just remembered, it came back because of it. That day months ago, me kneeling in the slush, prying jaws of steel off a tiny bleeding paw. The way those eyes clung to mine like a lifeline, and now here it stood, grown and towering, bringing me the same kind of death I'd saved it from, like a message, or a gift, or both. My breath came out shaky, frosting the glass as I whispered into the silence, You brought this to me." My throat burned. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. And then, without meaning to, the words slipped out. "Thank you, old friend. Old friend. God help me." A grizzly bear on my porch, and I called it that like we were two men sharing whiskey after a long winter. But the truth? It felt right. Because of those eyes. Its eyes. God, those eyes. They weren't wild. Not in that moment. They weren't the black, flat coins of instinct I'd seen in other beasts. They were lit with something I can't explain. Not soft, not tame, not human, but something that saw me, knew me, something that said, "You mattered once, and you matter now." I swallowed hard, every nerve screaming as I forced the next words out. "You can go now," I whispered, voice breaking like a kid's. "Go back to the woods. Be free. You don't owe me anything." And I believed that. I truly did. Because the wild doesn't work on debts. It doesn't keep score. It just is. Savage and beautiful and merciless. That's the rule. But rules don't mean a damn thing when the wild looks at you with gratitude in its eyes. For a heartbeat, I thought it understood. Thought it would turn and vanish into the black trees the way it had before. But it didn't. It stayed. Just stayed. Lowered itself slowly, like a boulder sinking into the snow. Curled those massive paws under its chest, head lifting just enough to keep its eyes on me through the glass. Breathing steady, calm, like it had made a decision, and I wasn't going to change it. My stomach dropped through the floor, because in that second, I realized something I hadn't let myself think until then. This wasn't a visit. This wasn't a passing moment in the night. It was waiting. For what? I couldn't tell. All I knew was that a grizzly, an apex predator, a killer built by God himself, had parked itself on my porch like some silent sentinel. And no part of that made sense. Minutes bled into hours, the clock ticking louder with every heartbeat. I sat in the dark, rifle in reach, eyes glued to that hulking shadow outside. The fire died down to embers, the cold creeping in like fingers. And still, it didn't move, didn't sleep, just watched. By the time the first light of dawn brushed the peaks pink and gold, my nerves were frayed to threads. My whole body ached from sitting rigid in that chair, afraid to blink, afraid to breathe too loud. And still, it stayed. And here's the part that kept me awake long after the sun climbed over the ridge. Somewhere between midnight and morning, the fear started to slip. Not all the way, not gone, but enough for something else to creep in, something colder, heavier, curiosity. Because I started asking myself questions I didn't want answers to. Questions like, what danger drags a beast out of its world and plants it at a man's door? What hunts a hunter? And what, in God's name, does it mean when nature comes to guard you? If I'd known what it was waiting for, what this night was really the beginning of, I would have locked every door, barred every window, and prayed harder than I've ever prayed in my life. But it was too late for that. I must have dozed off in the chair because the sound that tore me awake felt like a punch to the chest. A thud, heavy, then another. Then, God help me, a low, guttural snarl that made the walls vibrate. For a second, I thought I was dreaming, until glass rattled in the window and something screamed outside. Not an animal, a man. I shot up, heart clawing at my throat, and stumbled to the window. What I saw out there didn't feel real. The bear, my bear, was on the porch, teeth bared, muscles rippling like a storm under that pelt. And it wasn't alone. 2 men in camouflage, faces half hidden under hoods, rifles in their hands. Poachers. The kind that leave snares in the woods and bullets in whatever breathes too loud. And they were here, on my land. Guns raised at the beast that had come back from some miracle to find me. For half a second, my brain refused to take it in. Then I saw the glint of steel, the barrel flash, and the world exploded. Gunfire split the night like lightning. Splinters jumped from the porch. I heard myself yell, but the sound drowned under the roar that ripped out of the bear's throat, a sound so deep and raw it felt like the earth tearing open. And then it moved. Not away, not into the trees like any sane creature would. No, it charged, straight at the men. They fired again, the crack shattering the silence, and I swear I saw sparks jump off its shoulder. But the beast didn't slow, didn't falter. It hit them like a landslide, rifles clattering into the snow, men screaming. One went down hard, the other scrambled back, face white under the hood. I was frozen, stuck in the doorway, with nothing but my own breath sounding like a freight train in my skull. Until another shot ripped through the dark, too close, too loud, and instinct kicked in. I lunged for the rack, grabbed the shotgun I hadn't fired in years, and slammed 2 shells home with hands that barely felt like mine. My legs carried me out onto the porch before my fear caught up. The cold slapped me awake, snow crunching under boots, the stench of blood, sharp and metallic, twisting in the air. And there they were, one man on his knees, screaming, the other fumbling for a sidearm while the bear loomed over him like some ancient judgment. I didn't think, didn't aim. I just raised the barrel to the sky and fired. The blast shattered the night, echoed off the peaks like thunder. The man dropped the pistol. Both of them scrambled, slipping and cursing, their boots carving chaos into the snow. One ran so hard he fell twice before he vanished into the trees. The other bolted after him without a word. Gone. Silence rushed back in, thick and ringing. My breath poured out in clouds as I lowered the gun, every nerve screaming. And then I saw it. The bear. It stood there, sides heaving, steam curling off its back like smoke. And for a heartbeat, it looked at me. Not them. Me. And I swear, if you strip every word I've ever spoken, every lie, every truth, I'll still never find the language for what was in that stare. It wasn't rage, it wasn't instinct, it was sacrifice. That animal, built by a world that owes nothing to mercy, had put itself between me and death, risked everything for me. My chest cracked wide open right there on that porch, because in that second, I knew what no book, no ranger manual, no lifetime in the mountains had ever taught me. The wild remembers, and sometimes it chooses. For a long moment, the only sound was its breathing, slow, heavy. Then it turned, stepping toward the edge of the porch, and that's when my stomach dropped through the floor. Blood, dark, soaking through the snow where it stood. A trail running down its shoulder, glistening black in the moonlight. I felt my knees go weak. It had taken the bullets meant for me. I stumbled forward, words tumbling out in a whisper. No, 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 no. Like that could change the truth bleeding out in front of me. It looked back once, and God help me, there was no fear in those eyes, no regret, just that same impossible thing that's haunted me ever since. I thought it would limp off into the trees, thought it would vanish the way it came, and I'd never know if it lived or died. But it didn't. It sank down into the snow, slow and silent, until its great head rested on the porch boards like some fallen king. And what I did next, God help me, I still can't believe it. The moment I stepped off that porch, everything in me was screaming, don't do it. Every instinct I'd ever learned out here, the ones that keep men alive in the backcountry, told me I was about to cross a line you don't come back from. But then it moved, or tried to. Its massive body shifted just enough for its head to lift, its eyes locking on mine like twin embers dying in the cold. And I swear, there was no fight left in it, no wild fury, no rage, just trust. It didn't growl when I knelt, didn't flinch when I reached out. My fingers sank into the thick, wet fur at its neck, warm under the slick of blood, and for the first time since it was a cub, I touched it, not as a rescuer, not as some fool playing God in the woods, as a friend. Its breath came in shuddering waves, steaming against my jacket. My voice cracked like dry timber when I whispered, "Easy, I've got you. God help me, I had no plan, no thought beyond don't let it die here." So I did the only thing I could. I hooked my arms under that great head, heaved until my spine felt like it would snap, and dragged what had to be 600 pounds of raw life across the threshold of my cabin. The door slammed behind us, shutting out the night, and for a moment, It was like the whole world narrowed to the sound of its breathing and the thud of my own heart. I cleared space by the fire, yanking rugs, shoving chairs, anything to make room for a beast too big for four walls. It sprawled heavy against the planks, the smell of iron thick in the air. Blood seeped into the cracks, a slow, dark river that felt like time running out. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped the lantern, but I lit it anyway, turned the flame up bright, and that's when I saw the wounds. 3 bullet holes, shoulder, flank, 1 grazing the ribs, none clean, all pumping slow, dark streams. I wanted to panic, wanted to curse the world and those men and my own damn stupidity, but there was no time for that. So I did what I'd done before, months ago when it was small enough to fit in my arms. Boiled water, tore strips from my own shirts, and worked like a man possessed. Like every second I hesitated was another second its life slipped further away. It didn't fight me, not once, just lay there, chest rising and falling like some great bellows, eyes half-lidded, watching me through a haze of pain. And then, something happened I'll carry to my grave. When I pressed the last bandage to its side, my strength finally broke. I sank down on the floor, back against the wall, head in my hands, and that's when I felt it. Weight, warm and heavy, settling against my leg. I looked down, and there it was, this wild thing, this king of the mountains, laying its massive head on my lap like it belonged there. And I swear to you, if the sky had split open and poured fire into that room, I wouldn't have moved, because in that moment, something in me cracked wide open. It laid its head on my lap. Do you know what that feels like? To have a creature of the wild trust you more than its own world? I sat there for hours, hand buried in its fur, whispering nonsense to keep from breaking apart, watching its eyes flutter closed, its breathing slow, until, finally, it slept, and I thought, we made it. It's going to live. God help me, I believe that. I must have drifted too, because the next thing I remember is the pale glow of dawn creeping through the frost on the window, birds calling in the trees, the fire a bed of dying coals, and the space beside me, empty. The rugs, the boards, they were slick with blood, but the bear was gone. I staggered to the door, heart in my throat, eyes burning like fire, and when I stepped out onto the porch, I saw it, a trail. Red drops spattered across the snow, leading into the timberline like a wound through the world. And right then, I knew this wasn't over, not by a long mile. The trail cut through the snow like a wound in the earth. Drops first, small, scattered, then smears, streaking toward the timberline. Every one of them felt like a clock ticking down. I grabbed my coat, my rifle, and stepped off the porch without thinking. The cold bit into me, but I didn't feel it. All I felt was the pounding in my chest and the weight of a truth I didn't want to name. I followed fast, boots crunching, breath smoking in the still air. The forest swallowed me in silence, branches heavy with frost, shadows long and sharp in the early light. The only sound was the whisper of snow under my feet and the thud of my heart in my ears. Every few yards, I'd see another splash of red, dark against the white, and every time I prayed I wasn't too late, prayed for something I couldn't even put into words. 1/2 a mile, maybe more. My legs burned, my lungs clawed for air, but then the trees broke, and I saw it. High above the valley, on the edge of a ridge where the wind tore the clouds to ribbons, stood the bear. For a second, I thought I was seeing a ghost. Its body was ragged with blood, fur matted and black where the bullets tore through. It swayed once, like the wind might take it, but then it steadied, massive and unbroken, head lifting slow in the cold light. And it didn't run, didn't bolt for the trees the way every rule says it should. It just stood there, waiting. I climbed toward it, legs shaking, snow grabbing at my boots. My throat burned raw, and every step felt like walking through a dream I couldn't wake from. When I was close enough to see its eyes, the world fell silent. Those eyes, God, those eyes. I'd seen them once when they were small and afraid, seen them again through the glass when they came back to me out of the dark. But now they were something else. Tired, but not beaten, and behind the pain, something I'll never forget as long as I breathe. Recognition. It didn't snarl, didn't bare its teeth, didn't even flinch. It just looked at me, long, steady, like it was memorizing me the way I'd memorized every scar on its body. And then it bowed its head, just a fraction, barely a breath of movement. But I swear on everything I am, it was real, not fear, not submission, something older than both, like a goodbye. My knees nearly buckled right there in the snow. My throat closed so hard I couldn't speak. All I managed was a whisper, torn and useless against the wind. Thank you. It held that look for one heartbeat more. Then it turned, slow and sure, and slipped into the pines without a sound. And I never saw it again. Not its shadow, not its prints. Nothing, like the mountains swallowed it whole. But every night after, every time the wind rattles my windows, every time the moon lays silver on the ridge, I feel it. Those eyes, out there in the dark, watching. And if you ask me now if animals remember kindness, I won't give you a speech. I won't quote some book. I'll tell you this. I saw a beast fight men for me. I saw gratitude in a grizzly's eyes. I saw what words can't explain. If you believe animals remember kindness, right, nature never forgets. If your heart just skipped a beat, then you understand. Subscribe, because these are real stories of a world wilder and wiser than we think.